Salutations, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland. This video is about the arrest of Julian Assange. So, who he? Well, he's best known for being the man behind Wikileaks, the mastermind of the release of all these secret documents. They're United States government's documents almost exclusively. So he was a man who Sarah Palin said ought to be hunted down like bin Laden in her typical merciless and hyperbolic manner, really upping the ante. He's not quite as bad as bin Laden. You might disapprove of what he'd done, but honestly, he didn't kill anybody. And in fact, he was exposing killing, illegal killing in many cases. So really, who's worse? Would you think the world would be as badly off if bin Laden ran it as if Julian Assange ran it? I mean, I certainly have my criticisms of Assange, but really he's not in the same bracket as bin Laden by any means at all, and the two shouldn't be compared. So Mr. Assange is an Australian. He grew up in Queensland, if I got that right. He was brought up by a single mother in a family of no great status. There wasn't a lot of money in the house. He was quite gifted at IT, studied that for a while. I don't think he graduated. He worked in that sector. So he's in his late 40s now. And in the 90s, the early 90s, he was involved in various radical movements. And he was quite anti-authority. He disliked government secrecy, which he saw as excessive. Then he got involved in Wikileaks, helped to start it off. And it really went big in about 2010. You should read a book, Inside Wikileaks, by one of his German collaborators. And this German chap just said just how much he would cavil, as in Assange would cavil at him. He was very fault-finding, always talking about the Spiegel. The newspaper's actually Der Spiegel, and then castigating the German chap because his English wasn't absolutely perfect and Assange couldn't speak any German at all. So he comes across a bit distant, conceited, has ideas about himself. His psychology is fascinating. But he's best known for publishing all these confidential US government documents. And the dam broke in 2010, and that's when WikiLeaks really became a household word. So in the years leading up to that, there was a young US Army private, Bradley Manning. And I'm not sure if he was stationed in Iraq or not, but despite being a very low-level soldier, he had access to some highly confidential information and was horrified about what he saw. About war crimes being committed by the US military. I don't suggest all or most of the US military did this or was complicit in it, but it was fairly large scale and it had been covered up. And we often hear about the Americans' public's right to know, and they didn't know, and freedom of expression, all this kind of stuff. And these weren't military secrets. It wasn't where troops were deployed now, what the next attack was going to be. It was about incidents that happened several years earlier. So revealing this information was not going to endanger US military personnel at that time. And having said that, it might provoke such ire against the United States that would lead to more attacks. But really, a lot of people were furious with the United States anyway, not always reasonably. So Bradley Manning went to his superior and said that he had discovered all this shocking evidence of crimes against humanity, of massacres of civilians being shot dead from helicopters, the helicopter pilots knowing they were civilians and shooting them purposefully. And his officer said, well, nothing, would bury it, we're not going to do anything about it. So Bradley Manning felt duty-bound to reveal this to the public, that people should not be able to get away with such war crimes. And so that's how WikiLeaks was born. I don't understand the particulars of how he did it. I'm not a technical person. But anyway, the information found its way into the hands of Assange, who published it. That is WikiLeaks, also US diplomatic cables. There was a means of sending secret communications between the State Department and US embassies and consulates around the globe. Moreover, these US diplomatic missions could communicate with each other, supposedly securely. And WikiLeaks got a hold of a huge lot and dumped it on the internet, about 70,000 documents. They did redact them. They edited out information which they felt would lead to unmasking secret US assets, because then these people's lives would be in danger. And Assange himself said, supposing we couldn't do that, we couldn't edit out certain names, if it was a stark choice between keeping it all secret or publishing all, we would publish it all, because the moral imperative is so great that the public should know what's been going on. The US public should know of the crimes that have been committed in their name. And obviously it's not only the US government that does this. Many governments do this, and the United States is not the worst offender. But is obviously quite secretive, and many governments are far more secretive. The Chinese, the North Koreans, just about any Middle Eastern government. Perhaps the difference is they don't gratingly assert their own moral superiority, especially when it comes to freedom of the media. Anyway, the US was obviously incensed by this. It was deeply embarrassing. People found out what Hillary Clinton really believed, what she was saying, and there was a lot of hypocrisy. Who was it? I can't remember. Was it Sir Francis Bacon said, an ambassador is an honest man sent abroad to lie for the good of his country. Well, that really does encapsulate diplomacy. And obviously many US diplomats were being cloven-tongued. And the same with diplomats all over the world. That's what politeness is, I suppose, dishonesty. And the United States have been spying on the European Union on a grand scale. And Martin Schulz said he was very offended by this, a senior socialist EU politician. You shouldn't spy on your friends. The other thing is, what a waste of resources. They were squandering their assets, their money, on countries like Germany, which represent no threat to the United States at all, which is very friendly with the US, which hosts many US military bases. And all these people who could have been spying on Al-Qaeda, on the Taliban, on whoever, who really are mortal threats to the United States and preventing attacks. So the US did what they could to try and shut down WikiLeaks. They couldn't do it, so they managed to deny them access to the financial system. So WikiLeaks was soon crippled financially, couldn't receive or send payments, things like that. That's the way you get them through the world financial system. The US authorities threatening anyone who helped them. Edward Snowden came along and really renewed WikiLeaks a few years later. So in 2010, Assange was in the United Kingdom, and he was in hiding for a while, but he'd arranged a media event. He came out to Trafalgar Square, and many journalists have been told there to expect him to emerge from the shadows in a very dramatic moment, which is just typical Assange. At that time, he was wanted for sexual assault in Sweden. And as Assange said, this is the Saudi Arabia of feminism. So feminism is so extreme in Sweden that well nigh all would count as rape, that you'd almost have to sign documents before each physical action. And he was not sent abroad to face questioning there. Obviously, the Swedish police could have come to the United Kingdom to question him. Anyway, he could have said the CIA has put her up to it. These are bogus allegations because the CIA has committed every crime on the statute book on an absolutely enormous scale. So it's very easy to believe they would try to besmirch his reputation by paying someone to cook up some false allegations. In fact, he didn't try that one. So the United States also wanted to extradite him. There was a possibility of him ending up in Supermax, things like that, for espionage. And there were American politicians trying to outdo each other in their blood-curdling threats of what they were going to do to Assange for the outrageous crime of telling the truth. They were their own government documents. Nobody disputed these documents were entirely authentic. Now, admittedly, there were secrets, and there are honourable secrets. Every government keeps secrets. It's often right to keep information confidential. But this was kept confidential often because it was deeply shameful, not because it was actually a matter of national security. So governments will often pretend it's about security, when really it's about sparing their blushes and about keeping the public in the dark. So anyway, he was arrested by the UK police, bailed. They were considering sending him to Sweden to face trial. I'm not sure why he wasn't sent almost immediately. There's a European arrest warrant. Sweden's a European Union country, same as the United Kingdom at the moment, so people were often dispatched forthwith to stand trial. But the Swedish police at this stage only wanted to question him. If they'd charged him, I suppose that would have made the difference. So he was desperately seeking countries that would grant him asylum, and most of them will only give you asylum if you're already in the country. But the Ecuadorians said that they would, so he entered the Ecuadorian embassy in London, right beside Harrods, which is London's premier department store, and he stayed there. And the British authorities thought he's got to come out eventually. Obviously, there's diplomatic immunity. The British police cannot go in there without the Ecuadorians' permission. That is Ecuadorian sovereign territory. That would be a grave violation of the Vienna Convention on diplomatic immunity. So they thought he'll come out eventually, he'll get bored of it. He goes stir crazy, not allowed to set foot on the street for years and years. It reminds me of one of those, is a Hungarian cardinal, Minderhazy spent years in an embassy. So the British police were posted outside to arrest him if he ever set foot outside, because they said, well, we have to, because another EU state has eventually issued an arrest warrant for him. We've got to do that. And then there was a court hearing. He failed to turn up, so he'd skipped bail. So that was an offence in the United Kingdom. Anyway, Lady Gaga went in to visit him. Pamela Anderson went in to visit him. He certainly had his supporters around the world, and he regularly spoke to the media from that balcony, and journalists came in and he broadcast from there. But surely this would play with somebody's mind. And I thought, well, eventually the police have withdrawn, which was good. There were 4 police officers out there around the clock. What a huge waste of scarce police resources. You hardly ever see a police officer in the streets of London, and they're needed. Assange, he's not dangerous, not physically dangerous. The thing is, you think, wouldn't he come out at 3 o'clock in the morning and just go somewhere and hide? Maybe, but would you eventually track down somebody's going to rat you out? I thought was thinking, have a huge party in the Ecuadorian embassy, and hundreds of people come out, and he's in the crowd. Which one is he? Just disappears into the night. But eventually he fell out with his Ecuadorian hosts. There's a new government in Ecuador. The United States didn't seem to pressure the Ecuadorians very much to knuckle under during the last 7 years. And the Ecuadorians have withdrawn consular protection. They say they want him out. He's proved to be an absolute nuisance. So he seems to fall out with a lot of people. The Australians had been giving him consular advice and assistance, and they reissued his passport only a couple of months ago. So the Ecuadorians requested the British police to come in to arrest him. The Ecuadorians didn't physically remove him themselves. So having this express permission, indeed request, to come and arrest him, the British police did so. So it was not a violation of international law. And he's been arrested, he's grown a long beard, and he's gone to court. So he's been charged with skipping bail. The Swedes are considering reopening that investigation. They decided not to charge him after all. And the United States said, well, he stole this information for us. It's the hacking. They're very careful about what exactly to charge him with, not espionage. I think will really stand up in court. They could charge him with several more things, but he's got to be made an example of. He leaked 70,000 confidential documents. If you leak even one, that's a big deal. Now, I have some respect for what he did, and I recognize he was exposing crimes, but people you can't leak these confidential documents and expect to get away with it. So I think some sort of punishment is in order. I don't want him to get life. I don't want to get 20 years. I feel the same about Bradley Manning. Now, it's a bit different with Bradley Manning, who now calls himself Chelsea Manning. He swore an oath to obey these orders. That's it. That's your duty. Like it or don't like it, you've got to do it. And it's not up for privates to decide what they're going to do and break the law. You've got to follow orders. You might say, but these are illegal orders. I don't think they were illegal, actually. But he might say he was serving the greater good by exposing abuses. So Bradley Manning got, how long was it? Something like 20 years, but was released after 5, quite early, Obama's presidential pardon. So it's quite likely that Assange will be extradited to the United States. The United States has got a guarantee they won't execute him. But these extradition processes can take years. I remember to get, was Abu Hamza out, this Islamist terrorist who'd advocated such crimes. It took something like 8 years to extradite him. So do not expect US federal marshals to be slapping the handcuffs on Assange's wrist anytime soon.